My hand shook as I stood in front of that door. The key felt like ice against my palm. 48 years of marriage, and I'd never once turned this handle without permission. But Evelyn was gone now. 2 weeks in the ground, and this locked office was all I had left of her secrets. The house creaked around me. Thunder rolled outside. I could almost hear her voice whispering from the other side. "Not yet, Doug. You're not ready." But when would I ever be ready? Have you ever realized, too late, that the person sleeping beside you for half a century might have been a complete stranger? That every goodnight kiss, every shared meal, every quiet Sunday morning was built on something you never truly understood? That's what I felt standing there. My wife had died with her office locked, and I was about to find out why. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. My name is Douglas Marin. I'm 72 years old, and I thought I knew everything about love. Evelyn and I met when we were young and stupid. I was fixing cars in Cedarbrook. She was the new librarian with kind eyes and a smile that made my chest tight. We got married fast, the way people did back then. No big plans, no fancy dreams. Just two people who wanted to build something together. And we did. For 48 years, we built a life. But looking back now, I wonder how much of it was real. The office started as a guest room. Nothing special. We'd put up visitors there, let Evelyn's mother stay during holidays. But after her mom passed, something changed in my wife. She got quiet, distant. She asked if she could turn that room into her own space. Said she needed somewhere for her charity work, her writing, her thoughts. I helped her move furniture in. A heavy oak desk that took both of us to carry. File cabinets she bought at an estate sale. An old typewriter that clacked like a heartbeat every time she used it. "This is perfect," she'd said, running her hand across the desk. "My own little world." I'd laughed. "Just don't forget about me out here in the real one." She'd kissed my cheek, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. That was 23 years ago. The first time I noticed something was wrong came about a month later. I woke up at 2 in the morning and her side of the bed was cold. I walked down the hallway and saw light bleeding out from under the office door. I knocked softly. "Evelyn, you okay in there?" Silence. Then footsteps. The lock clicking. She opened the door just a crack. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. But she smiled anyway. "I'm fine, honey. Just working on some letters." At 2 in the morning? You know me. Night owl. She kissed me through the gap in the door and closed it again. I heard the lock turn. I went back to bed telling myself it was nothing. She was processing grief. She needed space. That's what good husbands do, right? They give space. But the late nights became a pattern. 3, 4 times a week I'd wake up alone. Sometimes I'd hear her crying. Sometimes humming old songs. Sometimes I'd swear I heard her talking to someone, her voice low and urgent like she was having an argument. But when I'd ask the next morning, she'd just smile and change the subject. The second red flag came when she changed the lock. I came home from work one day and noticed the doorknob looked different. Shiny. New. "Did you replace the lock?" I asked at dinner. She didn't look up from her plate. The old one was sticking. "I could have fixed it." "I know." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "But you do enough for me already." Her touch was warm. Her words were kind. But something in her voice felt like a wall going up. After that, I never saw inside that office again. Not for 23 years. People think marriage is about knowing everything. But it's not. It's about trust. It's about respecting boundaries even when they make you uncomfortable. Evelyn had earned that respect 1,000 times over. She'd stood by me through my worst years, when my business nearly failed, when my brother died and I drank too much, when we found out we couldn't have kids and I blamed myself for months. She never judged, never left, never made me feel small. So when she asked me to stay out of that room, I did. Even when the strangers started showing up. It happened on a Tuesday. I was washing the car when a young man walked up the driveway. Tall, maybe 25, with nervous energy and hands stuffed deep in his pockets. "Is Evelyn home?" he asked. "Who's asking?" "Just a friend." Evelyn came out before I could press him. She saw the kid and her whole face changed. Not angry. Not scared. Something else. Something I couldn't name. "Aaron," she said softly. They talked on the porch for 15 minutes. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I saw her hand on his shoulder. Saw him nod like she was telling him something important. When he left, he looked like he'd been crying. "Who was that?" I asked. "Someone I used to tutor," she said. "Years ago." But the look in her eyes told a different story. That night, I stood outside her office door and listened. I'm not proud of it, but I needed to know. I heard her voice, muffled but clear enough. "I can't tell him yet. He wouldn't understand." A pause. "No, it's not about trust. It's about protecting him." Another pause. I know. But this is my burden to carry." I went to bed before she came out. Pretended to be asleep when she slipped under the covers beside me. But I lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering what kind of burden my wife was carrying, and why she thought I was too weak to help her carry it. Years passed. The office stayed locked. Evelyn stayed kind. And I stayed quiet. Because what was I supposed to do? Accuse her of something I couldn't even name? Demand answers she wasn't ready to give? Love doesn't work that way. Love means waiting, even when it hurts. But then the cancer came. She hid it at first. Lost weight slowly enough that I didn't notice right away. Started wearing long sleeves even in summer. When I finally cornered her about it, she admitted she'd been to the doctor. Stage 3. Aggressive. Not much time. I fell apart. She held me together. Even dying, she was stronger than me. The last few months were hell. Chemo that made her sick. Pain that made her gasp in the middle of the night. But through it all, she kept going into that office. Kept locking that door. Kept typing on that old typewriter like she was racing against death itself. "Evelyn, please," I begged one night. "Let me in. Let me help you." She touched my face with hands that felt like paper. "You'll understand when it's time, Doug. I promise." The night before she died, she made me promise something I still wish I hadn't agreed to. "Don't open that door until I'm gone," she whispered. "Promise me." I promised. She died the next morning. Peaceful. Holding my hand. And that locked door became the only thing she left behind that I couldn't touch. The funeral was small. Evelyn didn't have much family, and most of our friends had passed on years before. But the church was full anyway. People I didn't recognize. Young people. Families with kids. They came up to me one by one, crying, saying things like, "She changed my life, and I wouldn't be here without her." I smiled and nodded and pretended I understood. But I didn't understand any of it. After everyone left, I went home to an empty house. Walked down the hallway. Stood in front of that door. And for the first time in 23 years, I wanted to break it down. That's when I found the key. It was in her bedside table. Wrapped in tissue paper. Tied with a faded blue ribbon like some kind of gift. I held it in my palm and felt the weight of everything I didn't know about the woman I'd loved for 48 years. That door wasn't just locked. It was guarded. What would you have done? Would you have respected her wishes and waited? Or would you have opened that door the second you found the key? Drop your answer in the comments because I need to know I'm not the only one going crazy here. I carried that key around for 3 weeks. In my pocket during breakfast. On the nightstand while I slept. Tucked in my wallet when I left the house. It felt alive somehow, like it was burning a hole through whatever I kept it in. Every time I walked past that door, my heart hammered. Part of me wanted to turn the lock and get it over with. The other part was terrified of what I'd find. What if Evelyn had been sick longer than she told me? What if there were medical bills she'd hidden? Debts I didn't know about? What if there was someone else? That thought kept me up at night. I'd lie there in the dark, alone in a bed that used to hold two, and I'd torture myself with possibilities. Maybe the young man on the porch wasn't just someone she tutored. Maybe those late-night phone calls weren't about charity work. Maybe the crying I heard through the walls wasn't grief, it was guilt. 48 years of marriage, and I was doubting her. God, I hated myself for it. But I couldn't help it. When you love someone that long, you think you know their rhythms. The way they take their coffee. The side of the bed they prefer. The small sounds they make when they're happy or hurting. Evelyn and I had all of that. We fit together like worn-in shoes. But looking back, I started seeing cracks I'd missed before. Like the time I found her crying in the kitchen at 3 in the morning. I'd come downstairs for water, and there she was, sitting at the table with a letter in her hands. When she saw me, she folded it up fast and wiped her eyes. Bad news? I asked. Just old memories, she said. I didn't push. I should have. Or the time I answered the phone and a woman's voice asked for Evelyn. When I said she wasn't home, the woman paused, then hung up. No name. No message. I told Evelyn about it later and she just shrugged. Probably a wrong number. But her hands were shaking when she said it. Little things. Tiny fractures in a marriage I thought was solid. And now, standing here with this key, all those fractures felt like earthquakes. Cedarbrook is a small town. The kind of place where everyone knows your business before you do. So when Evelyn got sick, people talked. They brought casseroles and sympathy cards and asked gentle questions about how I was holding up. But nobody mentioned the office. Nobody said, "Hey Doug, what was your wife doing in there all those years?" Nobody seemed to think it was strange that she'd locked herself away every night like she was hiding from the world. Or maybe they knew. Maybe everyone in town knew except me. That thought made my stomach turn. I started going through the rest of the house, looking for clues. I went through her dresser drawers, her closet, the boxes in the attic. Most of it was normal. Clothes that still smelled like her perfume. Books she'd never finished. Old photo albums from when we were young and stupid and thought we had forever. But nothing explained the office. Nothing explained the lock. I found one thing that stopped me cold. It was tucked in the back of her jewelry box, a small, folded piece of paper. I opened it carefully, afraid it might fall apart in my hands. It was a list. Names written in her neat handwriting. 20, maybe 30 names. Some had dates next to them. Some had dollar amounts. At the bottom, in different ink, she'd written, "Families aren't only born, Doug. Sometimes they're built." The same words she'd said to me years ago. The same words I'd thought were just comfort. But now they felt like a warning. I sat on the edge of our bed with that list in my hands and tried to make sense of it. Were these people she'd helped? Donated to? Why keep it hidden? Why not tell me? Unless it was something she knew I wouldn't understand. Or something she knew I'd hate. The rational part of my brain kept saying, she's gone. Whatever she did out of love. Just open the damn door and find out. But the scared part of me whispered, what if the truth ruins everything? Because that's the thing about secrets. Once you know them, you can't unknow them. Once you see the whole picture, you can't go back to the version of the story you liked better. And I liked my version of Evelyn. The kind librarian who married a mechanic and made him feel like he mattered. The woman who held my hand through every hard thing life threw at us. The wife who never complained, never judged, never asked for more than I could give. What if the woman in that office was someone different? What if I'd been married to a stranger? 3 weeks after the funeral, I finally cracked. It was late. Storming outside. The kind of night Evelyn used to love. She'd sit by the window with tea and watch the rain like it was telling her secrets. I poured myself a whiskey. Then another. Then I walked down the hallway and stood in front of that door. The key felt heavy in my hand. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break a rib. I thought about Evelyn's last words. You'll understand when it's time. Was it time? Or was I just too drunk and lonely to care anymore? I slid the key into the lock. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for me. I turned it. The lock clicked. The door opened. And I stepped into the room that had haunted me for 23 years. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. The office looked normal. Her desk sat in the center, neat and organized. The typewriter was covered with a cloth. File cabinets lined one wall. Bookshelves on another. But then I saw the photographs. Hundreds of them. Covering every inch of wall space. Pinned up with care, arranged in rows like a gallery. Children. Dozens and dozens of children. Smiling faces. Birthday parties. School photos. Graduations. Some were babies, some were teenagers, some were adults. All of them strangers. All of them staring at me from the walls of my dead wife's secret room. My legs went weak. I grabbed the edge of the desk to steady myself. What the hell was this? I moved closer. Each photo had a note pinned beneath it. Names. Dates. Little messages in Evelyn's handwriting. Graduated with honors. So proud. First Christmas in his new home. She wants to be a teacher. Just like you. My hands were shaking as I reached for one of the photos. A little girl with braids, maybe 7 years old, holding a certificate. Beneath it, Evelyn had written, Spelling Bee Champion. She reminded me of us. I didn't know this child. I'd never seen her before in my life. But Evelyn had. Evelyn had cared enough to frame her picture. To celebrate her. To love her. I turned around and saw the wooden chest. It sat in the corner, old and weathered, like something out of a grandmother's attic. I knelt down and opened it with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. Inside were letters. Hundreds of them. Bundled with string. Organized by year. The first bundle had my name on it. For Doug. When I'm gone. I pulled it out. The paper felt fragile. The ink was faded in places, like she'd written it a long time ago and kept coming back to it. I unfolded the first letter. And my wife's voice filled the room. My dearest Doug, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And you've finally found what I could never bring myself to say. Have you ever found something that changed everything you thought you knew about someone you loved? Tell me in the comments. Because I'm about to read the rest of this letter, and I don't know if I'm ready for what it's going to say. I sat on the floor of that office with my wife's letter in my hands, and for the first time since she died, I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep reading. My dearest Doug, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And you've finally found what I could never bring myself to say. Her handwriting was shaky in places, like she'd been crying when she wrote it. I could picture her sitting at that desk, typewriter pushed aside, pen in hand, trying to find the right words. I kept reading. I need you to understand something before you judge me. Everything I did because I loved you too much to burden you with my grief. My throat tightened. When we found out I couldn't have children, something broke inside me. Not just my body. My purpose. I felt like I'd failed you. Failed us. You told me it didn't matter, that we'd be fine without kids, and I smiled and agreed because that's what you needed to hear. But it mattered to me, Doug. It mattered so much I didn't know how to breathe through it. I had to stop. My eyes were blurring. I wiped them with the back of my hand and forced myself to keep going. So I found another way. A quieter way. A way that let me give the love I couldn't give to my own children. 25 years ago, I started sponsoring kids. One at a time at first. Through charities, through churches, through people who knew people. I paid for school supplies. For winter coats. For birthday presents. I wrote letters. I sent cards. I became part of their lives without ever telling them who I really was. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the letter. Over the years, it grew. 57 children, Doug. 57 kids who needed someone to believe in them. Some were foster kids. Some were orphans. Some just had parents who couldn't afford to give them what they needed. I gave them what I couldn't give us. I put the letter down and stared at the walls. At all those faces. Those weren't just random photos. They were her kids. The family she built in secret while I slept down the hall. God, Evelyn. I picked up the letter again. I know you're wondering why I never told you. Why I locked this door. Why I kept you out. The truth is, I was afraid. Afraid you'd feel like I was replacing the life we could have had. Afraid you'd think I was running away from you. Afraid you'd see this as proof that I wasn't happy with just us. But that was never true, Doug. You were my whole world. This was just the overflow. The love I had left over after loving you. I folded the letter and put it back in the bundle. My chest hurt. My head hurt. Everything hurt. I stood up and walked around the room, looking at each photo more carefully now. Each one had a story. A name. A moment Evelyn had preserved like it mattered. And it did matter. To her, these kids mattered more than secrets. More than sleep. More than her own comfort. She'd given them pieces of herself I didn't even know existed. I found another bundle of letters. This one wasn't labeled. I opened the first one. It was from a girl named Sarah. Dated 3 years ago. Dear Mrs. M, I got into college. Full scholarship. I can't believe it. My caseworker said it was because of the fund you set up. She said you've been helping me since I was 6 and I didn't even know. I don't know why you did this for me. I don't know what I did to deserve it. But I promise I won't waste it. I'm going to be a teacher. Just like you told me I could. Thank you for believing in me when no one else did. I sat down hard. My legs wouldn't hold me anymore. There were more letters. Dozens of them. Kids thanking her. Parents thanking her. Teachers saying she'd changed lives. And I'd known none of it. For 23 years, my wife had been a quiet hero, and I'd been too blind to see it. But then I found the envelope that made my stomach drop. It was at the bottom of the chest. Sealed. Labeled in handwriting that looked newer than the rest. The truth about Aaron. Aaron. The young man who'd shown up at our door. The one she said she used to tutor. I tore it open. Doug, there's one more truth you need to know. And this one is harder to explain. 23 years ago, I met a young woman named Clara. She was pregnant, alone, and terrified. Her family had disowned her. The father was gone. She had no money, no home, no help. I found her at the library one night. She was crying in the back corner, trying to figure out how to survive. I sat with her. I listened. And when she told me she didn't know if she could keep her baby, I made her a promise. I told her I'd help. Whatever she needed. However long it took. I paid for her prenatal care. Her hospital bills. I found her a small apartment. I bought baby clothes, formula, diapers, everything. And when Aaron was born, I was there. In the waiting room. Holding my breath like he was mine. I stopped reading. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. Clara tried, Doug. She really did. But she was young and scared, and the weight of it all crushed her. When Aaron was 2, she overdosed. Accidental, they said. But I think she just couldn't carry it anymore. Aaron went into the system. And I couldn't let that be the end of his story. So I found him a guardian. A good woman. Someone who'd love him the way we would have loved our own son. I paid for everything. His schooling. His clothes. His future. I watched him grow up from a distance. I sent birthday cards with no return address. I showed up at his school plays and sat in the back row. I became the ghost mother he never knew he had. And when he turned 18 and wanted to meet the woman who'd been helping him, I couldn't say no. So I let him come to the house. Just once. You met him, Doug. You asked me who he was. And I lied. Because how could I tell you the truth? How could I explain that I'd spent 20 years raising a child you didn't know existed? That I'd built a life around him while you thought I was just doing charity work? I was terrified you'd hate me for it. That you'd think I'd betrayed you. That you'd see Aaron as proof that I wanted something more than what we had. But I didn't, Doug. I swear to God, I didn't. I just couldn't let him drown. Not when I had the power to save him. The letter ended there. No signature. No goodbye. Just raw truth bleeding through ink. I sat there for a long time. The storm outside had stopped. The house was silent. My wife had raised a son. In secret. For 23 years. And I'd been too stupid to notice. I thought about all the nights she locked herself in this room. All the phone calls she took outside. All the times I caught her crying and she said it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. It was Aaron. It was 57 kids who needed her. It was a lifetime of love she gave away because she had too much to keep to herself. I looked at the photo on the desk. Evelyn smiling. Younger than I remembered. Happier. And I realized something that made my chest ache. She wasn't hiding from me. She was protecting me from the weight of her own heart. If your spouse had done this, would you be angry? Or would you understand? Because right now, I don't know what I feel. And I need to know I'm not alone in this. The next morning, I woke up on the floor of that office. My back screamed. My head pounded. Sunlight was coming through the window, harsh and unforgiving. For a second, I thought I'd dreamed it all. But then I saw the letters scattered around me. The photos on the walls. The wooden chest still open in the corner. It was real. All of it. My wife had lived a double life, and I'd been too trusting to notice. I dragged myself up and made coffee. Strong. Black. The kind that burns your throat and makes you feel alive even when you don't want to be. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Evelyn and I had eaten breakfast for 48 years, and I tried to make sense of it. She'd helped 57 kids. 57 lives she'd touched without ever asking for credit. Without ever needing me to know. But Aaron was different. Aaron wasn't just a name on a list or a photo on a wall. Aaron was the son we never had. The child she'd raised in secret while I slept down the hall. And the worst part? I couldn't even be angry. Because what she did was beautiful. Heartbreaking and complicated and messy, but beautiful. She'd taken all that grief, all that pain from not being able to have children, and turned it into something bigger than us. Something that mattered. But God, I wished she'd trusted me enough to tell me. I spent the rest of that day going through the office, reading every letter, studying every photo, trying to piece together the woman I thought I knew. There were thank you notes from parents, report cards from kids she'd sponsored, college acceptance letters, wedding invitations, birth announcements from the children of the children she'd helped. Her legacy wasn't in our house or our bank account or the memories we'd made together. It was in those faces on the wall, in lives she'd changed without ever asking for recognition. And I'd missed all of it. One letter stood out. It was from a boy named Marcus. He'd written it 10 years ago. Dear Mrs. M, my foster mom says you're the reason I get to go to camp this summer. I don't know why you'd do that for someone you don't know. But thank you. Camp is the only place I feel normal. At the bottom, in Evelyn's handwriting, she'd written, everyone deserves to feel normal, even if just for a summer. I folded the letter carefully and put it back. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I wasn't crying. I was just hollow. I thought about all the times Evelyn had smiled at me over dinner and asked about my day. All the times she'd kissed me good night and whispered, I love you. Those moments were real. I had to believe that. But they were also incomplete. Because while I was living my simple life, working my simple job, loving my simple wife, she was out there building an empire of kindness. And she did it alone. The phone rang that afternoon. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Is this Douglas Marin? A woman's voice. Polite. Professional. Yeah. My name is Rebecca Holt. I'm calling from the Children's Hope Foundation. I'm so sorry for your loss. Evelyn was one of our most dedicated sponsors. I sat down. She was. For over 20 years. She funded scholarships, covered medical expenses, paid for school supplies. We wanted to reach out and let you know how much she meant to us. And to the kids. I didn't know what to say. Rebecca continued. We're hosting a small memorial in her honor next month. Some of the children she helped wanted to share their stories. We'd love for you to be there. I'll think about it, I said. Of course. Take your time. And Mr. Marin? Your wife changed more lives than you know. We just wanted to make sure you knew that. I hung up and stared at the wall. A memorial. For Evelyn. With kids I'd never met. Kids she'd loved in secret. Part of me wanted to go. To see the faces she'd cared for. To hear the stories she never told me. But part of me was scared. Because what if they knew her better than I did? What if they saw sides of her I never got to see? What if I wasn't the most important person in her life after all? That thought sat heavy in my chest. I went back to the office that night. I couldn't help it. It was like the room was calling me. I sat at her desk and ran my fingers over the typewriter keys. They were worn smooth from years of use. I wondered how many letters she'd typed here. How many thank you notes. How many quiet confessions to people who'd never know her real name. I opened one of the file cabinets. It was full of financial records. Receipts for donations. Bank statements showing monthly transfers. Spreadsheets tracking every dollar she'd spent. She'd been meticulous. Organized. Like this was a business, not a secret. At the bottom of one drawer, I found a journal. Leather-bound. Old. I opened it carefully. The first entry was dated 24 years ago, right after her mother died. I don't know how to live with this grief. It sits on my chest like a stone. Doug tries to help, but he doesn't understand. He thinks I'm mourning my mother. But it's more than that. It's the children I'll never have. The family I'll never build. The love I'll never give. I feel like I'm drowning. I turned the page. I met a girl today. Clara. She's 17 and pregnant and so scared she can barely speak. I sat with her for 2 hours. Just listened. When she left, she hugged me. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I kept reading. Page after page of Evelyn's private thoughts. Her fears. Her hopes. Her quiet determination to turn pain into purpose. She wrote about every child she helped. Every family she supported. Every small victory that made the sleepless nights worth it. And she wrote about me. Doug asked me today what I was working on. I told him it was just charity stuff. He smiled and said he was proud of me. I wanted to tell him the truth. But how do I explain that I'm building the family we couldn't have? How do I tell him that every dollar I spend, every hour I lose sleep, is because I need this? Because without it, I'm just a woman who failed at the one thing she was supposed to do. I love him. God, I love him more than anything. But I can't let him carry this weight. It's mine to bear. I closed the journal. My eyes were burning. She'd been protecting me. All those years. Every locked door, every deflected question, every quiet lie. It was all to keep me from feeling the weight of her grief. Because she thought I couldn't handle it. And maybe she was right. I thought about the life we'd built. The simple, quiet life in Cedarbrook. Sunday mornings with coffee and the paper. Evenings on the porch. Holidays with just the two of us. I thought it was enough. I thought we were happy. But Evelyn had needed more. Not because I wasn't enough, but because her capacity for love was bigger than one man could hold. And instead of resenting me for it, she'd found a way to give that love to people who needed it. She'd been a hero. A silent, exhausted, beautiful hero. And I'd been too blind to see it. I stayed in that office until dawn. Reading. Remembering. Grieving the woman I'd lost, and the woman I'd never fully known. When the sun came up, I made a decision. I was going to that memorial. I was going to meet the kids she'd saved. And I was going to make sure her story didn't end in a locked room. Would you go to that memorial? Would you want to meet the people your spouse had secretly helped? Or would it hurt too much? Let me know in the comments because I still don't know if I'm making the right choice. 3 weeks later, I stood in front of a small community center on the edge of town, staring at a banner that read, "In memory of Evelyn Marin, a celebration of love." My stomach was in knots. My hands were sweating. I almost turned around and went home. But then I thought about her journal. About the life she'd lived in secret. About the weight she'd carried alone. I owed her this. I walked inside. The room was packed. More people than I'd expected. Families with kids. Teenagers. Young adults in college sweatshirts. Older folks who looked like they'd been through hell and back. And every single one of them was smiling. A woman approached me. Late 50s, kind eyes, the kind of face that made you want to trust her. "You must be Douglas," she said. "I'm Rebecca." We spoke on the phone. I nodded. My throat was too tight to speak. "Thank you for coming," she said. "It means the world to these kids. Evelyn talked about you all the time." That surprised me. She did. Of course. She loved you more than anything. She said you were her anchor, her reason for staying strong. I didn't know what to say to that. Rebecca led me to a chair near the front. People kept coming up to introduce themselves. A young woman named Sarah who was studying to be a teacher. A man named Marcus who ran a youth center. A couple with 2 kids who said Evelyn had helped them adopt when they couldn't afford the fees. Each one had a story. Each one had been touched by my wife in ways I'd never imagined. And each one looked at me like I was supposed to know what they were talking about. But I didn't. I didn't know any of them. The program started with a slideshow. Photos of Evelyn I'd never seen before. Her at charity events. Her handing out school supplies. Her sitting with kids at summer camps, reading books, laughing. She looked younger in those photos. Lighter. Like the weight she carried at home didn't exist in those moments. Like she was free. A teenage girl stood up to speak first. She was maybe 16, nervous, clutching a piece of paper like it might fly away. "My name is Emma," she said. "And Mrs. Marin saved my life." The room went quiet. "When I was 8, my mom died. My dad couldn't handle it. He started drinking. A lot. I ended up in foster care. Bounced around from house to house. Nobody wanted to keep me because I was angry all the time. I broke things. I yelled. I was a mess." She paused, wiping her eyes. "Then I got a letter. It said someone believed in me. Someone thought I was worth investing in. Someone was going to make sure I had what I needed to succeed. I didn't know who Mrs. M was. I just knew that every birthday, every Christmas, every time I needed something, school supplies, a winter coat, money for a field trip, it showed up. With a note that said, 'You matter. Keep going.'" Emma looked right at me. I found out it was her 3 years ago. I tracked down the charity and made them tell me. And when I met her, she didn't want credit. She didn't want thanks. She just hugged me and said, "I always knew you'd be okay." Because of her, I am okay. I'm graduating next year. I got a scholarship. I want to be a social worker so I can help kids like me. She sat down. The room erupted in applause. I couldn't breathe. More people spoke. A young man who said Evelyn paid for his rehab when his family gave up on him. A mother who said Evelyn covered her son's medical bills when he got sick. A college student who said Evelyn's scholarship was the only reason she could afford to stay in school. Story after story. Life after life. All saved by the woman who used to cry herself to sleep in the room next to mine. When it was over, people came up to me again. They shook my hand. They hugged me. They thanked me for sharing her with them. I didn't know what to say. I hadn't shared her. I hadn't even known she was theirs to share. Rebecca walked me out afterward. "She never wanted you to feel like you weren't enough," she said quietly. "She told me that once. She said you were the love of her life, but she had so much love left over that she didn't know what to do with it. So she gave it away." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "She was terrified you'd think she was running from you. That you'd see all of this as proof that you'd failed her somehow." Did I? The words came out before I could stop them. Did I fail her? Rebecca looked at me with so much kindness it hurt. "No, Douglas. You gave her a home. A safe place to come back to every night. Without you, she wouldn't have had the strength to do any of this. You were her foundation." I wanted to believe that. God, I wanted to believe it. But all I could think about was the locked door, the late nights, the secrets she carried until they killed her. I drove home in silence. The house felt emptier than ever. I walked down the hallway and stood in front of her office. The door was still open. The light was still off. I flipped the switch and looked at all those faces on the wall, all those lives she'd touched. And I realized something that made my chest ache. I'd spent 48 years thinking I knew what love was, thinking it was quiet mornings and shared meals and growing old together. But Evelyn had shown me something different. Love wasn't just what you kept. It was what you gave away. She'd loved me. I knew that now. Deeply, completely, without question. But she'd also loved 57 kids who needed her more than I did. And instead of making me feel small, that realization made me feel honored. Because she could have chosen anyone to build her life with. Anyone to be her anchor while she saved the world. She chose me. I sat down at her desk and pulled out a piece of paper. My hands were shaking, but I started writing anyway. Dear Evelyn, I found your office. I read your letters. I met the kids. And I understand now why you locked that door. You weren't hiding from me. You were protecting me. You carried a weight I never could have handled, and you did it with grace. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry I didn't push harder to understand. But I'm grateful. So damn grateful that you trusted me enough to be your safe place. I don't know what happens next. But I know I can't let your story end here. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you did. Not because you'd want the credit, but because these kids deserve to know that people like you exist. I love you, Evelyn. I always have. I always will. And I finally understand what you meant when you said families aren't only born. I folded the letter and placed it on her desk, right next to the typewriter. Then I stood up and looked at the room one last time. This wasn't a tomb. It wasn't a secret. It wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was a legacy, and I was going to honor it. I walked to the door and paused. For 23 years, this door had been locked, a barrier between me and the truth. But not anymore. I left it open, and I left the light on. Because Evelyn's work wasn't finished. And neither was mine. If you found out someone you loved had been secretly changing lives, would you feel honored or hurt? Would you want to continue their work? Tell me in the comments. Because I'm about to do something I never thought I'd do. And I need to know if I'm crazy for trying. The letter came 3 days after the memorial. Plain white envelope. No return address. Just my name written in handwriting I didn't recognize. I almost threw it away. I'd been getting sympathy cards for weeks, and I was tired of reading other people's memories of a woman I was still trying to understand myself. But something made me open it. Inside was a single photograph. My breath caught. It was Evelyn, younger, maybe in her 50s. Standing in front of a small house I'd never seen before. And next to her, with his arm around her shoulders, was Aaron, the young man from the porch. They were both smiling. Really smiling. The kind of smile you can't fake. I turned the photo over. On the back, in neat handwriting, someone had written, "She saved me. Thank you for sharing her with the world." My hands started shaking. I sat down hard on the couch. Aaron, the boy my wife had raised from a distance. The son we never had. The secret that had probably eaten away at her more than all the others combined. And he was thanking me for sharing her. Like I'd had a choice. Like I'd known what she was doing and given my blessing. I stared at that photo for an hour. Maybe 2. Time stopped meaning anything. In the picture, Evelyn looked peaceful. Younger than I remembered her being at that age. Her eyes were bright, not tired. Her smile reached all the way to her soul. She looked like she did when I first met her. Before the miscarriages. Before the grief. Before the locked door became the only thing standing between us and the truth. That's when it hit me. Aaron hadn't just been another kid she sponsored. He'd been her do-over, her second chance at motherhood, the life she'd wanted with me but couldn't have. And instead of resenting me for it, he was grateful. I didn't know whether to cry or laugh, so I did both. The next morning, I went back to the office. I'd been avoiding it since the memorial. Too many emotions. Too many unanswered questions. But I couldn't hide anymore. I needed to understand Aaron's story. The whole story. Not just the edited version Evelyn had left in her letters. I found a separate folder in the file cabinet, labeled simply, Aaron James. Inside were documents I'd never seen. Birth certificate, court papers, guardianship agreements, school records, birthday cards, report cards, photos from every stage of his life. Evelyn had documented everything, like she was building a scrapbook for a child she couldn't claim. The earliest photo showed a tiny baby, maybe a week old, wrapped in a blue blanket. On the back, Evelyn had written, Clara's son, born October 3rd, 8 pounds, 4 ounces. Perfect. There were photos of him as a toddler, playing in a yard I didn't recognize. First day of school. Halloween costumes, Christmas mornings, and in the margins of some photos, Evelyn had written notes. He has Clara's eyes. His foster mom says he's doing well. I watched his school play from the back row. He was wonderful. She'd been there. For all of it. Invisible but present. I found letters Aaron had written to Mrs. M. over the years, thanking her for birthday presents, for helping with school supplies, for believing in him when nobody else did. One letter, written when he was maybe 12, stopped me cold. Dear Mrs. M., my foster mom says you knew my real mom. Is that true? Can you tell me about her? Nobody else will talk about her. They act like she never existed. But she did, right? She was real. Beneath it, Evelyn had written a draft of her response, crossed out and rewritten multiple times. Your mother was real, Aaron. She was young and scared and loved you more than anything. She wanted so much for you. And even though she's gone, she left you with the most important thing, the chance to become whoever you want to be. Don't waste it. My throat tightened. Evelyn hadn't just given Aaron money. She'd given him a connection to a mother he'd never known. She'd kept Clara's memory alive when everyone else wanted to forget. That's when I found the last bundle of letters. These weren't from Aaron. They were from Evelyn. Unsent letters she'd written to me over the years. Letters she'd never had the courage to give me. I opened the first one, dated 15 years ago. Dear Doug, I need to tell you something I should have told you years ago. But every time I try, the words stick in my throat. I'm afraid you'll hate me. I'm afraid you'll think I chose them over you. But that was never true. I chose you first. Always. They were just what I did with the love you didn't need. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Because I can't keep lying to you, even if my lies are made of silence. She never sent it. The next letter was dated 10 years ago. I saw Aaron today. He's 17 now. Tall, handsome, smart. Everything Clara hoped he'd be. Everything we could have had. And I stood there watching him, and I felt proud and heartbroken all at once. Because he's mine, but he's not mine. And you don't even know he exists. God, Doug. I'm so tired of carrying this alone. But I can't put it down. Not without breaking everything we've built. Another unsent letter. I kept reading. Letter after letter. Year after year. Evelyn pouring her heart out to a husband who would never read the words. Until now. The last letter was dated 6 months before she died. Her handwriting was shaky, weak. Doug, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And you found everything I was too afraid to show you. I don't know if you'll forgive me. I don't know if you'll understand. But I need you to know this. Loving you was the easiest thing I ever did. You made me feel safe. You made me feel whole. And because of that safety, I had the strength to love all these other people too. You weren't my second choice. You were my foundation. And everything I built because you held me steady. I'm sorry I never told you. I'm sorry I locked you out. But please know that every night, when I finally came to bed, I was coming home. To you. Always to you. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the bundle. My eyes were wet. My chest hurt. She'd loved me. Through all of it, she'd loved me. But she'd also loved Aaron. And 56 other kids. And she'd carried the weight of that love alone because she thought I couldn't handle it. Maybe she was right. Maybe I couldn't have handled it back then. But I could handle it now. I took out my phone. My hands were shaking as I typed out a message to Rebecca from the foundation. I need Aaron's contact information. There's something I need to tell him. She responded within minutes. Are you sure? I don't want to push you into anything you're not ready for. I typed back, I'm ready. Evelyn wanted us to know each other. It's time. 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally, I'll reach out to him. Give me a day. I set the phone down and looked around the office. At the photos. At the letters. At the life my wife had built in secret. This room wasn't a betrayal. It never was. It was proof that love doesn't run out. It multiplies. It grows. It finds places to land even when you think you've given all you have. Evelyn had loved me with everything she had. And then she'd found more love to give. Not instead of me. Because of me. And Aaron. He wasn't a replacement for the family we couldn't have. He was the family we did have. We just didn't know it yet. If you found out your spouse had secretly raised someone else's child, could you accept it? Could you love that child too? Because I'm about to meet the son my wife never told me about. And I don't know if I'm ready for what that means. The coffee shop was busy. Too busy. I sat in the corner, nursing a cup of black coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, watching the door. Rebecca had set up the meeting. Said Aaron wanted to talk. Said he'd been waiting years for this moment. I didn't know what I wanted. Answers, maybe. Closure. Or maybe just to see the face of the boy my wife had loved enough to keep secret. The door opened. A young man walked in. Mid-20s. Tall. Dark hair. Nervous eyes scanning the room. Our eyes met. He froze. It was him. Aaron. The kid from the porch. Except he wasn't a kid anymore. He was a man. And he looked terrified. He walked over slowly, like he was approaching a wild animal. Mr. Marin? His voice was soft. Respectful. Doug, I said. Call me Doug. He sat down across from me. Didn't order anything. Just folded his hands on the table and stared at them like they held all the answers. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, I didn't know if you'd want to meet me. I didn't know if I wanted to either, I admitted. But here we are. He nodded. Swallowed hard. She talked about you all the time. Mrs. Marin. Evelyn. She said you were the best man she'd ever known. She lied a lot, apparently. The words came out harsher than I meant them. Aaron flinched. I'm sorry, I said quickly. That wasn't fair. No, I get it. He looked up at me. His eyes were wet. You're angry. You should be. She kept me from you. Kept you from knowing I existed. I'd be angry too. I'm not angry, I said. And I realized it was true. I'm just confused. I spent 48 years thinking I knew her. And then I find out she had this whole other life. With you. With dozens of other kids. And I missed all of it. You didn't miss it, Aaron said quietly. You were part of it. She couldn't have done any of it without you. How do you figure? Because you gave her stability, safety, a reason to come home every night. She told me once that you were her anchor, that without you, she would have drowned in all the pain. I looked down at my cold coffee. She said that. All the time. She said loving you was easy. Everything else was hard. But you made the hard stuff possible. I didn't know what to say to that. Aaron leaned forward. Look, I know this is weird. I know you didn't ask for this. But I need you to understand something. She didn't choose me over you. She chose both of us. Because she had enough love for both. She should have told me. I know. She knew. She wanted to. But she was terrified. Of what? Of losing you. Aaron's voice cracked. She said you were the only thing in her life that was completely hers. That hadn't been touched by grief or loss. And she was afraid if she told you about me, about all of it, you'd see her differently. You'd see her as broken. She wasn't broken. I know that. You know that. But she didn't. Not really. He wiped his eyes. She spent her whole life trying to fix things that couldn't be fixed. And she thought if you knew how hard she was trying, you'd realize she was failing. I sat back. My chest felt tight. Tell me about her, I said. Tell me about the version of her I didn't get to see. Aaron smiled. A real smile. She was incredible. Every birthday, every Christmas, I'd get a card. No name. Just, from someone who believes in you. When I was in high school and my foster family couldn't afford my class trip, the money showed up. Anonymous donation. When I got sick and needed surgery, same thing. She was always there. Invisible, but there. When did you find out it was her? When I turned 18. My caseworker told me someone had been funding my life since I was a baby. I demanded to know who. It took months, but I finally tracked her down. And you showed up at our house. Yeah. I was so nervous I almost threw up. But I had to meet her. Had to thank her. What did she say? Aaron's eyes went distant. She cried. Said she'd been waiting for that moment for 16 years. Said she'd dreamed about it 1,000 times but never thought it would actually happen. And me? What did she say about me? She said you were the love of her life. That everything she did because you gave her the strength to do it. She said you were her reason. I felt something break loose in my chest. Something that had been holding on too tight for too long. She raised you, I said. From a distance. But she raised you. She did. And now she's gone. And I don't know what to do with that. We sat there in silence. Two men who loved the same woman in completely different ways. Two men she'd protected from each other because she thought we couldn't coexist. But she was wrong. She left something for you, I said. In her office. Letters. Photos. Everything she saved. Aaron's breath caught. Really? Yeah. You should come see it. See what she built. Are you sure? I nodded. She wanted us to know each other, Aaron. She just didn't know how to make it happen while she was alive. So let's do it now. For her. He wiped his eyes. Nodded. We stood up. Shook hands. It felt formal and awkward and right all at once. As we walked out, Erin said, "Thank you for not hating me." "I could never hate you," I said. "You were part of her heart, and I loved her heart more than anything. Even the parts you didn't know about. Especially those parts." We drove to the house in separate cars. I kept checking my rearview mirror, making sure he was still following. Afraid he'd change his mind. Afraid I'd lose this fragile connection before it even started. But he stayed behind me the whole way. When we got to the house, I led him down the hallway. Stopped in front of the office door. "This is it," I said. "Her secret world." Erin stared at the door like it might disappear. "She spent every night in here," I continued, "for 23 years. And I never knew why. Now I do." I pushed the door open. Erin stepped inside and froze. He looked at the walls, at the hundreds of photos, at the letters, at the wooden chest still sitting open in the corner. Then he saw his section, an entire wall dedicated to him. Photos from every year of his life. Letters he'd written. Cards he'd sent. Everything. He walked over slowly, touched one of the photos. His hand was shaking. "She kept everything," he whispered. "She loved you," I said. "More than you know." He turned to me, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I took time away from you. I took her attention. I—" "Stop." I walked over and put my hand on his shoulder. "You didn't take anything. She gave it freely. And I'm grateful she did. Because look at you. Look at what you became. I became this because of her." "I know. And she became who she was because she loved you." We stood there together, two men bound by a woman who'd loved us both enough to sacrifice her own peace. And for the first time since she died, I didn't feel alone. Could you accept your spouse's secret child as your own? Could you love them the way she did? Let me know in the comments. Because I'm about to do something that will change everything. Erin stayed for hours that day. We went through every photo, every letter, every memory Evelyn had saved. He cried. I cried. We laughed at some of the notes she'd written. We sat in silence through others. By the time the sun started setting, something had shifted between us. We weren't strangers anymore. We were family. The kind Evelyn had been trying to build all along. "What are you going to do with all this?" Erin asked, gesturing at the room. I'd been thinking about that question for weeks. Ever since the memorial. Ever since I realized Evelyn's work shouldn't end just because she was gone. "I'm going to turn it into something permanent," I said. "A foundation. A scholarship fund. Something that keeps helping kids the way she did." Erin's eyes lit up. "Really?" "Yeah. She spent 25 years doing this in secret. It's time the world knew what she did. Time these kids got the support they deserve." "Can I help?" The question surprised me. "You want to?" "Of course." She gave me everything. This is the least I can do. We spent the next few weeks planning. Erin had experience with nonprofit work. He knew people, had connections I didn't. Together, we started building something bigger than either of us alone. We called it Evelyn's Promise Foundation. The mission was simple: provide support for kids who needed it. Scholarships, emergency funds, mentorship. All the things Evelyn had done quietly, we'd do loudly. Make sure no kid ever felt forgotten. Rebecca from the Children's Hope Foundation connected us with lawyers. We filed paperwork, set up a board. Erin and I became co-directors. People started donating. Small amounts at first. $20 here, 50 there. People who'd heard about Evelyn at the memorial. People who wanted to honor her memory. Then the local newspaper ran a story. Local woman's secret charity work continues after death. The donations tripled. Then a TV station picked it up. Ran a segment about Evelyn. Showed photos from the office. Interviewed some of the kids she'd helped. The donations exploded. Within 3 months, we had enough to fund 10 full scholarships. Within 6 months, 20. People wanted to be part of something good. Something pure. Something that proved kindness still mattered. And Evelyn's story gave them that. But the best part, the letters. We started getting letters from all over. From people Evelyn had helped decades ago. From kids who'd grown up and had families of their own. From strangers who'd heard her story and wanted to share theirs. One letter came from a woman named Sarah. The same Sarah who'd spoken at the memorial. Dear Mr. Marin, I wanted you to know that because of your wife, I graduated college. I'm a teacher now. And last week, I sponsored my first student through Evelyn's Promise Foundation. She saved me. Now I get to save someone else. Thank you for making sure her legacy lives on. I read that letter to Aaron over coffee one morning. He smiled. She'd be so proud, he said. Yeah, she would. We were sitting in the office when it arrived. The unmarked envelope with no return address. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was the same as the photo Aaron had sent me months before. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper. And another photograph. This one showed Evelyn and Aaron. But they weren't alone. There was a third person. A young woman. Pretty. Smiling. Standing between them with her arms around both. On the back, someone had written, "She saved us both. Me and my mom. We never got to thank her properly. But we want you to know, she didn't just change Aaron's life. She changed ours too. Love, Julia." I turned the letter over. Dear Mr. Marin, my name is Julia. I'm Aaron's foster sister. We grew up together. Evelyn paid for both of us. Helped both of us. Loved both of us. I'm writing because I think you should know something Aaron is too nervous to tell you. He's getting married next month. To a wonderful woman named Claire. And he wants you to be there. He's too scared to ask. Thinks you might say no. But I think Evelyn would want you to say yes. Think about it. Sincerely, Julia. I stared at the letter. Then at Aaron, who was suddenly very interested in his coffee cup. You're getting married? I asked. His face turned red. I was going to tell you. When? I don't know. I didn't want to assume you'd want to come. We're not. I mean, you're not obligated to. Aaron. I set the letter down. When's the wedding? 3 weeks. I'll be there. His head snapped up. Really? Of course really. Your family. His eyes got wet. I don't have anyone to walk me down the aisle. My foster parents passed away. I was going to just walk alone. But... He stopped. Looked at me. Didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I'd be honored, I said. Aaron broke. Completely fell apart. And I stood up and hugged him. This kid my wife had loved from a distance. This son we'd never planned for. He was mine now. Not because of blood. But because Evelyn had built a bridge between us. And I wasn't going to let that bridge fall. The wedding was small. Simple. Beautiful. Aaron looked terrified and happy all at once. Claire was perfect for him. Kind eyes. Warm smile. The kind of person Evelyn would have loved. When it was time, I walked Aaron down the aisle. Me. The man who'd had no idea he existed a year ago. The man who'd spent 48 years thinking family meant blood and marriage. But Evelyn taught me different. Family means showing up. It means loving people even when it's hard. Even when it's complicated. Even when you didn't plan for it. At the reception, people kept coming up to me, telling me how much they admired what I was doing. How Evelyn's foundation was changing lives. How proud she'd be. And I realized something. I wasn't doing this for recognition. I wasn't doing it to ease my guilt. I was doing it because love doesn't end when someone dies. It transforms. It finds new ways to exist. Evelyn's love had transformed into Aaron, into 56 other kids, into a foundation that would outlive all of us. And my love for her, it transformed too, into acceptance, into understanding, into a second chance at family I didn't know I needed. Late that night, after the wedding ended and everyone went home, Aaron pulled me aside. "Thank you," he said, "for everything. You don't have to thank me. I do. You could have hated me, could have seen me as proof that she loved someone else more. But you didn't. That's because I finally understand," I said. "She didn't love you more. She loved you differently. And there's room in my heart for that now." He hugged me, hard, like he was holding on to something precious. And maybe he was. Because we were all that was left of Evelyn. The two men she'd loved in secret. Now standing together in the light. If someone gave you a second chance at family, would you take it? Even if it wasn't the family you expected? Tell me in the comments. Because sometimes the best families are the ones we build, not the ones we're born into. 6 months after the wedding, Evelyn's Promise Foundation was supporting 43 kids. We had volunteers, monthly donors, a small office downtown. It was real, permanent, growing. Aaron ran most of the day-to-day operations. I helped with fundraising, spoke at events, told Evelyn's story to anyone who'd listen. People connected with it. With her. With the idea that one person could make a difference. We weren't just helping kids anymore. We were inspiring others to help too. One afternoon, I got a call from a local high school. They wanted me to speak to their students. Talk about Evelyn. About kindness. About legacy. I almost said no. Public speaking wasn't my thing. I was just a mechanic who'd been married to an extraordinary woman. But then I thought about all those faces on the wall in her office. All those lives she'd touched. And I said yes. The auditorium was packed. Teenagers who looked bored and skeptical. Teachers who looked tired. I stood at the podium and looked out at them, and my mouth went dry. Then I saw Aaron in the back row. He nodded. Smiled. I took a breath. And I told them Evelyn's story. I told them about the locked door. About finding the photos. About learning that the woman I'd loved for 48 years had been secretly changing the world. I told them about Aaron. About the 56 other kids. About the letters and the late nights and the weight she carried alone. And I told them the truth. The hard truth. I spent years thinking she was keeping secrets from me. And she was. But not because she didn't trust me. Because she loved me too much to burden me. The room was silent. She taught me that love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it hides in locked rooms and late-night phone calls. Sometimes it looks like betrayal when really it's the most selfless thing a person can do. I paused. Looked at the kids staring back at me. Some of you are going through things nobody knows about. Some of you are carrying weight that feels too heavy. Some of you think nobody cares. But you're wrong. Someone cares. Someone sees you. And maybe that someone is sitting right next to you, or teaching your class, or serving you lunch. You just don't know it yet. My wife showed me that love doesn't run out. It multiplies. And the more you give, the more you have. So don't wait. Don't lock your kindness behind doors. Don't save your love for later. Give it now. Give it loudly. Give it to people who need it. Because you never know when your time runs out. And you never know whose life you might change. I finished. Stepped back from the podium. The room stayed silent. Then one kid started clapping. Then another. Then the whole auditorium erupted. I stood there, overwhelmed, thinking about Evelyn. Wishing she could see this. Wishing she knew that her secret was out and the world was better for it. After the speech, kids came up to me, asked questions, shared their own stories. One girl told me she'd been thinking about giving up, but hearing about Evelyn made her want to try again. That's when I knew. This was bigger than a foundation, bigger than scholarships. This was about changing the way people saw kindness, making it normal to care, normal to help, normal to love strangers like family. That evening, I went back to the office. Evelyn's office. The one I'd left open with the light on. I sat at her desk and pulled out a piece of paper. Started writing. Dear Evelyn, it's been a year since I found your office. A year since my world fell apart and came back together in a completely different shape. I thought I'd spend the rest of my life angry at you. Angry at myself. Angry at all the time we wasted. But I'm not angry anymore. I'm grateful. You showed me what real love looks like. It's not perfect. It's not simple. It's not always visible. But it's real. And it matters. Aaron and I are running the foundation now. We're helping kids the way you did. We're telling your story. We're making sure the world knows what you did. And I'm finally understanding what you meant when you said families aren't only born. You built a family, Evelyn. A big, messy, beautiful family. And I'm part of it now. I miss you. Every day. But I'm not sad anymore. Because you're still here. In every kid we help. In every letter we receive. In every life we change. You didn't fail, Evelyn. You succeeded in ways I'm only just beginning to understand. I love you. I always have. I always will. Rest easy, my love. I've got it from here. I folded the letter and placed it in the desk drawer, right next to all the others. Then I stood up and looked around the room one last time. At the photos. At the letters. At the legacy she built. This room used to represent everything I didn't know about my wife. Now it represented everything I'd learned. Love isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. I turned off the light, closed the door, but I didn't lock it, because secrets were done. Truth was all that mattered now. And Evelyn's truth? It was beautiful. Have you ever discovered something about someone you loved that completely changed how you saw them? Was it worth the pain of learning? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Because I'm about to share the final piece of Evelyn's story. And it's going to change everything one last time. A year and a half after Evelyn died, I got a package in the mail. Large. Heavy. No return address. By then I'd learned not to be surprised by mysterious mail. Evelyn's network was vast. People were still reaching out. Still sharing stories. Still saying thank you. But this package felt different. I opened it carefully. Inside was a leather-bound book. Handmade. Beautiful. On the cover, embossed in gold letters, the Book of Promises, Stories from Evelyn's Children. My hands shook as I opened it. The first page had a dedication to Douglas Marin, who shared his wife with the world and taught us that love multiplies when you give it away. From the 57 lives she changed. With gratitude and love. I turned the page. What followed were stories. Dozens of them. Handwritten. Typed. Some with photos. Some with drawings. Each one from a different person Evelyn had helped. Marcus, who ran a youth center now, who credited Evelyn with saving him from addiction. Emma, who was in graduate school studying social work, who said Evelyn taught her that broken people could still be whole. Sarah, the teacher, who'd started her own mentorship program for at-risk kids. Story after story. Life after life. All connected by one woman who decided her grief didn't get to win. I read every single one. It took hours. By the end, I was crying so hard I could barely see. These weren't just thank you notes. These were testimonials. Proof that one person's kindness could ripple outward forever. The last page had a note from Erin. Doug, when Mom, because that's what she was to me, a mom, when she died, I thought her story ended. But you proved me wrong. You took her secret and turned it into a legacy. You gave her the recognition she never wanted but always deserved. Thank you for loving her enough to share her. Thank you for loving me enough to accept me. You're the father I never had. And I'm proud to be your son. Love, Erin. I closed the book. Set it on the desk where Evelyn used to write her letters. And I finally understood. She hadn't been hiding from me. She'd been preparing a gift. A gift she knew I'd only appreciate after she was gone. Because while she was alive, I was too close to see it. Too comfortable to understand it. But now I saw everything clearly. Evelyn had loved me with her whole heart. But her heart was bigger than one person could hold. So she'd found ways to give the overflow to people who needed it. She'd turned her pain into purpose, her grief into grace, her silence into salvation for dozens of kids who had nowhere else to turn. And she'd done it all while making me feel like I was her whole world. Because I was her foundation, her safe place, her reason to keep going. Without me, she couldn't have done any of it. She'd said so herself in those unsent letters. I wasn't her second choice. I was her first. Always. The kids. They were the beautiful consequence of our love. Not a replacement for it. I walked down the hallway. Past the office door. It was open, like always. Light off, but the room wasn't dark. Sunlight streamed through the windows now, illuminating all those faces on the wall. I didn't go in. Didn't need to anymore. That room had given me everything it had to offer. Instead, I walked to the kitchen, made coffee, sat at the table where Evelyn and I had shared 48 years of breakfasts. And for the first time since she died, I didn't feel alone. Because she wasn't gone. She was everywhere. In Erin. In the foundation. In the 43 kids we were helping. In the letters that kept coming. In the lives that kept changing. Her legacy wasn't locked in a room anymore. It was out in the world, multiplying, growing, becoming something bigger than either of us could have imagined. And I got to be part of it. Not because I'd earned it, but because she'd loved me enough to build a bridge between her two worlds. And I'd been brave enough to cross it. Every night before bed, I walk past that office. The door stays open. The light stays off. But I stop. Just for a moment. And I say the same thing. Thank you, Evelyn. For trusting me with your secret. For loving me enough to protect me. For showing me that love isn't about possession. It's about release. I understand now. I finally understand. And then I go to bed. alone but not lonely, grieving but not broken. Because love doesn't end when someone dies. It transforms. It finds new vessels, new hearts to fill, new lives to change. Evelyn taught me that. Not with words, with actions, with a locked door that became an open legacy. I once thought the worst thing a spouse could do was keep secrets, but I learned something deeper. Sometimes secrets aren't about betrayal. They're about protection, about grace, about carrying burdens alone so the people you love don't have to. And sometimes, the greatest gift you can give someone is the truth, even if it comes too late to say thank you in person. Last week, Aaron and his wife Claire had a baby. A little girl. They named her Evelyn. When Aaron called to tell me, I broke down. Happy tears this time. Pure joy. "Will you be her grandfather?" he asked. I didn't hesitate. I already am. Because that's what Evelyn had been building all along. Not just a network of sponsored children. Not just a charity operation. She'd been building a family. A family that stretched across years and zip codes and bloodlines. A family held together not by DNA, but by something stronger. By choice. By love that refused to quit. And now I was part of it. Fully. Completely. The mechanic who married a librarian 50 years ago had become a father figure to a young man he never knew existed. Had become a grandfather to a baby girl named after a woman who'd saved more lives than most people would ever touch. That's not tragedy. That's grace. This morning, I went to the cemetery. Brought flowers. Sat by Evelyn's grave for an hour, just talking. I told her about the foundation. About Aaron's baby. About the book her kids had made. About the lives that kept changing because she decided her pain didn't get the final word. You were right, I said. About everything. Families aren't only born. Sometimes they're built. Sometimes they grow in the dark, in locked rooms, in secret sacrifices nobody sees. But they're real, Evelyn. Just as real as the one we had. The wind picked up. Trees rustled. For a second, I could have sworn I heard her voice. I know, Doug. I always knew you'd understand. You just needed time. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe grief does strange things to lonely old men. But I don't think so. I think love finds ways to communicate even after death. Through memories. Through legacies. Through the lives we touch and the bridges we build. Evelyn's Promise Foundation is thriving. We're helping kids in 3 states now. We've funded over 60 scholarships. We've provided emergency assistance to dozens of families. We've created mentorship programs, college prep courses, and support groups. All because one woman decided to turn her locked door into an open invitation. And all because one man decided to honor her secret instead of resenting it. People ask me all the time if I'm angry, if I feel betrayed, if I wish she'd told me while she was alive. The answer is complicated. Yes, I wish she'd trusted me. Yes, I wish I could have helped her carry the weight. Yes, I wish we'd had more time to talk about it, to understand it together. But no, I'm not angry. Not anymore. Because anger would dishonor everything she built. Anger would slam that door shut again. And I refuse to do that. That door, that single locked door at the end of our hallway, taught me the most important lesson of my life. Love isn't about knowing everything. It's about trusting enough to let some things remain mysterious. It's about honoring the spaces people need to be fully themselves. It's about accepting that the person you love might have depths you never reach, and that's okay. Evelyn was my wife for 48 years. But she was also a guardian angel to 57 kids. A silent hero. A woman who turned her deepest pain into someone else's greatest hope. I got to love one version of her. They got to love another. And both versions were real. Both versions mattered. I don't have to choose which version was better. I get to honor them both. Because that's what love does. It makes room. It expands. It refuses to be limited by jealousy or pride or the need to possess. Real love lets people be complicated. Lets them carry secrets when they need to. Lets them protect you from truths you're not ready to hear. And when you finally discover those truths, real love says thank you, even if your hands are shaking and your heart is broken and you don't understand yet. Real love waits for understanding. And when it comes, real love transforms grief into purpose. That's what Evelyn gave me. Not just a marriage. Not just companionship. She gave me a lesson in what it means to love someone bigger than yourself. She was bigger than me. Bigger than our house. Bigger than our quiet life in Cedarbrook. And instead of making me feel small, that realization made me feel honored. Because she chose me. Out of everyone in the world, she chose me to be her anchor. Her safe place. Her reason to keep going. That's not second place. That's everything. Tonight, I'll leave the office door open. Like I do every night. Not because I'm waiting for her to come home. But because I want the light from the hallway to spill into that room. To illuminate those faces. To remind me that love doesn't lock doors, it opens them. And tomorrow, I'll keep working. Keep helping. Keep telling her story to anyone who'll listen. Because Evelyn's promise wasn't just to those 57 kids. It was to the world. A promise that said, pain doesn't get the last word. Grief doesn't win. Love always finds a way. And I'm living proof that she was right. My name is Douglas Marin. I'm 73 years old. I'm a widower, a foundation director, a father figure, and a grandfather. But most importantly, I'm the man who was loved by Evelyn Marin. The woman who locked her office every night, not to keep me out, but to build something beautiful in the dark. And when she died, I finally opened it. And instead of finding betrayal, I found grace. The kind of grace that changes everything. The kind of grace that proves love never dies. It just transforms into something the world needs more. That locked door broke my heart. But it also rebuilt it. Bigger. Stronger. More open than I ever thought possible. And I wouldn't change a single thing. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about love and secrets and the complicated people we share our lives with, hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications. Because more stories like this are coming. Stories about the messy, beautiful, heartbreaking truth of what it means to be human. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever discovered something about someone you loved that changed everything? Did it break you or build you? Your story matters. Share it. Inspire someone else who's standing in front of their own locked door, wondering if they should turn the key. Thank you for being part of this family. Thank you for listening to Evelyn's story. And thank you for believing that love, real, complicated, transformative love, is worth fighting for. See you in the next story.